Hey, Clemson family, we are here to take a longer look at the Tigers versus Longhorns playoff matchup at Texas in Austin. Uh, I know the Longhorns are heavily favored, more than one score, but guess what? There are some reasons for optimism, and we will get into those today. I'm Bill Zimmerman. This is the Reign Supreme All podcast.
I'm Daniel Shirley, and we're welcomed by Jeremy Timmerman, our buddy, joining us here on the show for the first time. Going to be part of the podcast family. Jeremy, how you doing, man?
I'm good. I'm just hoping I can manage to stay on and not get thrown off. That's what I'm
No.
looking for.
Well, you're good, and we're really happy you're. Micah couldn't be here today, but that's why we're doing this with four of us, so we can have a group of us at time, and who could be here. And one of these days, we'll get all four of us on together. But Jeremy, we've been kind of messaging back and forth about the game. What's your biggest concern about the game coming up Saturday? I mean, we're less than a week out for the first playoff game for Clemson in the 12-team field.
Well, as I was looking at it, I guess I haven't looked at one place I should have looked. It's been kind of befuddling to see how the running game has just disappeared down the stretch for Clemson. But when you look at it, I think I had it up here earlier. The South Carolina is one of the top 20 defenses in the country against the run. SMU is even better than them. And the good news is Texas isn't quite as good against the run as SMU or South Carolina, but they're close. SMU gives up 93 yards a game on the ground. Texas only gives up 106, which is right behind South Carolina. So that's a long way to get to. My biggest concern is if Clemson can't get the running game going, are they going to be able to pass against the Texas secondary the way they've been able to kind of make it work against SMU, and some even against South Carolina? That's my biggest concern, is that they won't be able to get the run going, and then that'll make it hard to pass against this defense.
Yeah, look, there's a couple of pieces to that, right? We know Phil Mafah is not healthy. I mean, you can see him grabbing his shoulder when he's getting off the pile or picking himself up off the field after running the ball. So how healthy can he be? I don't think he can be 100% healthy, even with 2 weeks off. Can they get him to where he's close to what he was at the start of the season? We'll find out. But Cade Klubnik's going to have to play great on Saturday. And I think he played, I mean, you guys tell me what you thought, Bill, what you thought. I thought he played really, really well for a quarter and a half. And then he made one great throw at the end. But other than that, it was a little off on Saturday against SMU. I don't think he played well at all against South Carolina. There were several misses where it could have, the slant to, I think, Wesco, that could have been a touchdown, or maybe it was TJ Moore. So I think he's going to have to play great for them to win. And we'll see if he can do that. I thought he's had a really, really good year, especially after what he did last year. But he's going to have to be that superstar quarterback that we've seen from Clemson when they get to the playoff in years past.
Yeah, I think they had maybe one of the best offensive games that they had in a long time under Klubnik. His passing accuracy was maybe the best I've ever seen out of Klubnik against SMU. And that was coming off a game against South Carolina where you and I talked. He was throwing behind guys. They're moving this way. They're having to stop or reach back and catch the ball. They're losing some yard after catch. Ball was sailing quite a bit also against South Carolina. He really dialed that in against SMU. Now, there were some decisions along the way that were tough. Certainly that fourth quarter was very difficult. Once the offensive line started getting beat a little bit, which we hadn't seen in a few weeks, because there was no running game, like Jeremy's talking about. That's how important that is to set up that passing game. SMU started teeing off in that fourth quarter. I wouldn't say Klubnik really looked rattled, but his options were taken away, right? And that's why you had a 3-and-out, a 5 plays and punt, a 3-and-out, and SMU just kept getting the ball back. The defense was having to go out there, get trucked a little bit, and they were a little bit gassed. Be sure, by the way, to comment. Tell us what you think. We don't want this to just be about the three of us. YouTube.com/Clemson Kickoff is the best place to have your thoughts seen. The other thing that worries me about Texas, and I've watched maybe 4 games, the Georgia games, a little bit of Oklahoma, and a good bit of the Florida Gators because I live down here. they can get a guy open and they can get a receiver open in no time flat. And I mean, like wide leaping open, like Wesco was for that one touchdown against SMU, and just nobody around, and it's a trot to the end zone from there. If they get that running game going and they bust a couple of guys open like that in the passing game, that could be tough for Clemson to come back from. And we've seen the Tigers defense vulnerable to some breakdowns here and there. They've got to dial that in a little bit, and they've got to really force Ewers into some mistakes.
Yeah, I think so. Sorry, Jeremy, go ahead.
Yeah, the thing about Texas too is that not to drag us back to the defensive side, but that makes those big plays even more costly is you really don't face a defense like Texas. They're top 20 in running against the running game. They're number 1 against the passing game. Unless you're playing Ohio State, there's really not another defense that is that good against both things. And so because of that, like Bill was saying, you just can't afford to give up that one big play. This isn't like when you play some of these other teams. It's like, well, we'll get another chance. We'll get that point back. You might not. If Texas gets 21, you might not be able to get there against them. That's how good that defense is. You look, except for when they played Georgia the first time and just got smashed in the face a little bit and caught off guard. Nobody's really been able to hit that 21 mark on them all year easily. And so you can't afford, like Bill was saying, you can't afford to let that guy get loose over the top, because that one score could be the difference.
Does it feel like Texas hasn't reached its potential? I mean, they play in these games. You go back to the Arkansas game. Arkansas is not very good, and that was a struggle, right? And early on against Oklahoma was a struggle. And I mean, I know they've won all their games except for the one, right? But it doesn't feel like they've dominated, where that's kind of what the thought was going into the season. So, and I know Clemson has been the same way. Clemson hasn't played great this year. It hasn't played a great game yet. I know it's had some really good quarters. That first quarter Saturday against SMU was really strong, but it doesn't feel like either one of these teams has really kind of reached its potential, which, if you're Clemson, you say, okay, now we can. Well, that's exciting. Well, what if Texas does? And I feel like they're very similar teams, except that Texas is the big favorite, probably more talented. I won't say a better coaching staff because we've seen what Dabo can do when you get in these big moments. But that to me is really interesting. Which one of these teams is going to put it together? And I don't feel like either one of them has.
Well, and even in the big games, Daniel knows as well as anybody, I have complained about the play calling in the big moments all year. South Carolina, I try not to turn into the just run the ball or just pass the ball. I try not to turn into that fan, but when you move all the way down the field on passing the ball, 75, Cade goes 4 for 4 for 75 yards, and then you try a triple flea flicker. You deserve for that to go as wrong as it did. But Texas kind of did the same thing against Georgia in the SEC championship game. They had the last drive where they were moving down the field with slants and running the ball and doing the things they've been doing well for 2 or 3 years now. And then got on about the 25 and decided that was the time to heave it into the end zone 3 times. So you're right, Daniel. They've kind of both had similar, especially in the games where they've struggled. They've had similar coaching. I don't want to say mistakes, but more of just if the coach with Clemson and with Texas, sometimes it feels like if the coaches on the offensive side of the ball would get out of the way just a little bit and just let the guys do what's working, they'd both score 35, 40 points a game.
Yeah, the triple reverse against South Carolina killed the whole momentum of the offense. There was no reason to call that at that point. And then we know it turned into a fumble. I still don't think that was a fumble that Phil Mafah didn't have control of on the ground. But there was no reason to call that at that point. And I know it has worked at some points through the season, but there's a time and place for that kind of stuff. And I think Jeremy, I love the way you put it. The coaching has gotten in the way sometimes during the year offensively. That's my only issue with the offense. Bill knows this more than anybody. My issue is with the defensive coaching for the most part, but the offensive coaching, and Bill's laughing at me because he gets the crazy text. the offensive coaching has gotten in the way at times. Look, if it's working, don't get away from it. That's what NFL coaches do. If something is working, I'm going to keep doing it until you stop it. And that's what you want to see from the Clemson staff. And I think if they do that, they have a chance to win this game coming up on Saturday.
I think Dabo Swinney, and you and I have talked about this a few times. He, for years, has expected the offense to always be balanced, to always be able to execute every aspect of the offense. And if something is working, he's not just going to keep doing it and doing it and doing it until it can be stopped. And that's, never been the case. And this may be a week where if you find something that works, you've got to do it, because they are going to have to stretch the field to have any kind of success running the ball, whether that's with Klubnik running the ball, whether David Iyamame comes in and is able to contribute as a true freshman, whether you're doing Antonio Williams, easy for me to say, on some sweep action, or some of the other guys. Maybe you're employing Olsen, Pat Henry, or Josh Sapp as an H-back to get a little extra blocking. I don't know that Riley has the horses to put in a true two-back set like we saw some a couple of years ago before he got there. But they've got to find some way to open things up for some aspect of a running game. You don't want to go Mike Leach against this Texas defense and just throw it 45, 50 times if you can help it. That does mean you do have to try to stretch that field, open things up deep. But it just seems like, there's a little bit of a chicken or the egg thing for this offense right now. Do you not complete the passes because you don't have rhythm, or you do not have rhythm because you're not completing those mid-length and deep passes? And they've kind of got to find just a little more comfort zone. They were pretty good against SMU. They've got to build on that, take it just a half step further.
I've told folks when Clemson hit that gear from 2015 to 2019, and now granted, right, 4 of those 5 years, your quarterbacks were Deshaun Watson and Trevor Lawrence, who, off the field issues aside, I mean, that's 2 of the best college quarterbacks that the sport's really ever seen. But what they did better than anybody is they would bleed you to death. It was like a spread wing tee almost, in terms of it wasn't running, but they bleed you to death on 7-yard outs. They'd hit a 7-yard out. The receiver's not doing anything fancy. He catches the ball. He takes 1 step upfield. Maybe he gets 8 yards. Maybe he gets 7.5. Maybe he breaks it and gets 12. But, you can do the math. You hit 7 yards, 7 yards, 7 yards, 7 yards all the way down the field, you're going to score. And then eventually they'd settle in so hard trying to stop those 7-yard outs that somebody would be wide freaking open over the top. And they've kind of gotten away from that. They try to run on first down, it doesn't work. So they run again on second down, still doesn't work. And now you've got to get 9 yards. So I would just love to see them. And when they do it, Cade can do it. When they rely on those little outs, the little slants, the little hooks, he does it, and they start looking like that 2015 to 2019 Clemson again. But too often they get away from it for one reason or another, and it just sucks the life out of the offense.
I think they've got to get Brenning still involved, right? That'll help open up the outside. I think they've got to get in a rhythm. And if they get in a rhythm, and this is Bill's contention for the longest time with Dabo, is keep your foot on the pedal and don't get conservative. And if you get up by 10 halfway through the second quarter, don't be satisfied with that going into halftime. You've got to keep that going.
That's where you don't need to coach like an NFL coach.
Right.
Like coach like Dabo did from like 2011 to 2018, where, we're up by 30. Let's see if we can get to 40.
They look like a desperate team Saturday night in the first quarter. Desperate. Like their entire lives depended on it. And it did, for the college football playoff. If you don't win that game, you're going to play in the Cheez-It Bowl. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with the Cheez-It Bowl. Or what at Pop-Tart Bowl now, whatever it is. Nothing wrong with that. But you've got to play desperate. And that's coaching, that's defense, that's offense, that's special teams, whatever it is. Don't be reckless, but they've got to play desperate if they're going to win this game coming up on Saturday. And look, they're going to be at Austin, hostile environment. I don't know that it's the greatest environment, intimidating. It is a good one, but I don't know that it's intimidating like LSU or anything like that at night. But you've got to be ready for all that, and you've got to play desperate to win this game.
One thing I just thought about as you were saying that, and I'd love to hear both of y'all's thoughts on this. We've never seen anybody play in college football a do or die game, like our actual for sure do or die game between two really good teams at home. We don't know what any of these stadiums look like in that situation. Daniel, you and I, Bill too, we've been to high school games. I was at one the other Friday at Northeast where nobody in Macon has ever seen a public high school stadium look like that one did. And we've never seen college teams play in that atmosphere. We don't know what Austin looks like. We don't know what Happy Valley looks like. This weekend could be so much fun unless you're one of the road teams.
But will that open up some pressure on those home teams? I mean, look at the Power Four conference championship games. There was a chance that new members of conferences could have swept all those Power Four conference titles. And of course, I think one, the Arizona State coming in was the only one. And then
Oregon. Yeah, Oregon too.
Oregon, that's right. So it went 50-50. It went down the middle.
Exist anymore.
So when 50-50 down the middle, with existing members having held their ground and new teams coming in, we may see that again with this home team situation that you're talking about. Maybe you've got so much writing on it, you've got so many people in your ear for 2 weeks straight around your own campus. Tigers are going to have a little bit of ability, as will three other teams, to get away from that, kind of be in their own environment around one another. I think I read somewhere that the host schools are only required to share like 3,000 tickets. So it's not going to be, a Tiger Walk environment by any means. You may see some plugged in boosters have some close contact here or there with the players. That happens. I think it's a good thing, especially with the culture that Clemson's got. Maybe some other programs like 2-10 Florida State. Hey, I worked that in there. It might not be as healthy in an environment like that, but I think it could serve Clemson well to have that chance to kind of get away and just focus.
There's no pressure on Clemson, right? I mean, everything from here on out is gravy. Because if they don't make that kick last week and go to overtime, SMU's got all the momentum, right? And SMU probably would be favored if you look at lines or something to win the game at that point. That's fine. There's no pressure on Clemson. There's no pressure on SMU. Nobody thinks, a lot of people don't think SMU should have been in. That's fine. I think there's no pressure on Indiana, right? They're a huge dog. There might be some pressure on Tennessee, but all the pressure on Ohio State of playing at home. I mean, I can't tell you how many people I've talked to said Ohio State would be better if they were on the road because of how tense it's going to be for them. So there's no pressure on Clemson this week. Go play like that. Go play like that. Nobody expects them to win. Go play like that and put all the pressure on Texas.
I've told people all for years now, I would either be the greatest coach ever in games like this, or I wouldn't even be allowed on the bus when it was over. Because when I tell you there will be – because you look at Texas, I mean, you look at the stats, you look at what they can do defensively, you look at who they've got on offense. That, like you said, the offense really hadn't gotten clicking other than a couple of times all year for Texas. But, I mean, there's no reason to like Clemson in this game. And if I'm the Clemson coaching staff, we're faking punts. Not all of them, but we're going to fake a couple of them. We're going to have some surprise onside kicks. We're going to throw it deep on the first play of the game. Why not? This is the game you break out the triple flea flicker, which I did not appreciate SMU breaking that out on Clemson just to show them what it looks like when you don't completely botch it. Yeah. That wasn't sweet. I didn't enjoy that. But yeah, I mean, this is the kind of game where I would have so much fun coaching a game like this, where you go out there and lose by 30. Everybody's going to go, well, yeah, we saw that coming. But you got a chance to win it because Texas hadn't really scored more than 30 most of the year.
Right.
Yeah.
There's so much pressure on Texas. Absolutely.
Yeah. And one thing I like about the pressure on Texas is Ewers isn't really going to be all that mobile. They may try to bring Manning in. Clemson's got tape of both guys that they can look at, so it's not like somebody's going to come off the bench like that Miami quarterback last year you've never seen before and you don't know what they're going to run with him. I do want to circle back to play like you're desperate. That can apply to 10 of the 11 men on the field when Clemson has the ball, but not Cade Klubnik. Like he sometimes plays a little too desperate. You and I have used the term hero ball about that. He had a really, I think, okay, some decisions weren't great. Well, that's part of college football. It's going to happen. I think he looked pretty collected, pretty smart. I think he was reading situations fairly well against SMU, and that's got to continue. And again, just be just what another quarter step, half step sharper for him. But he can't revert back to the long, deep scrambles back and kind of orbiting out wide, to borrow a term from orbit motion that you might do with a receiver behind the quarterback, because Texas might be able to swallow you up back there. You might not be able to get rid of the ball. It's better to have a short sack and be able to line right back up than a long sack. And suddenly you're way, way, way behind the chains, especially without a running game that you can keep the opposition guessing. Just a couple minutes left for us, a few minutes left, but is there any key thought that you've thought of that we haven't really touched on yet that we want to work in? Go ahead and Jeremy first, I think.
Well, just to piggyback off that Klubnik point, the thing about Cade is this year, if they had a little bit better game plan against Georgia, a little bit better game plan against Louisville, Cade had the kind of year where he would have been in the Heisman conversation. There was a point within the last month of the year where he was like the fifth best odds to win the Heisman, and I went, I've been watching this team. How? And then I went back and looked at the stats objectively, and no, he was a top 5 in the passing yardage, top 3 or 4 in completion percentage, great touchdown interception ratio, runs well. So that's the kind of quarterback Clemson has. So you're right, Bill. If he can play within himself and let everybody else play desperate, he could have a special game.
And just real quick, it's his A game that's really, really good in Heisman caliber. It's the mistakes and the things he needs to clean up that really kind of keep him out of that Heisman conversation. Sorry, Daniel, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say special teams have to be good, right? You got to make field goals. Aiden Swanson's got to be better than he's been all year because he hasn't been good. They've lost the field position battle for most of the year because, the other team's punter kicks a 45-yard punt and then Swanson kicks a 25-yard punt. And that's got to stop. But no, I think the key, when I say play desperate, I meant more coach desperate, right? Prepare desperate. Not because when you play desperate on defense, you're out of position, right? You're not doing your assignment. Cade has, Bill, how many times have we talked about other people say Cade has to play Superman? That's exactly what he doesn't need to do.
Amen.
He needs to play in the system, be smart with the ball, get the ball out of his hands. And he's done that for what? I mean, what have they played? 12 games now, 13 games? He's done that for 90% of the season. And if he could do it for 4 more quarters on Saturday, I think they have a chance to win this game. But if he reverts and tries to do too much, they could get blown out.
Don't want to see that any more than we wanted to see South Carolina in a bowl better than the Cheez-It Bowl that you mentioned earlier. So there you go. Well, make sure you catch us on social media. We're going to try to do one more episode between now and kickoff on Saturday in Austin. Twitter.com, Instagram.com. I don't know what Blue Sky's URL is actually. / Clemson Kickoff is where you will find us at those 3 sites. And maybe we'll pop something on Threads a little bit, but we try to stay active on Twitter and Instagram primarily. Make sure you subscribe to us, youtube.com / Clemson Kickoff, and get those comments in there because we sure didn't cover everything and we want to hear what Clemson fans have to say. Jeremy, really appreciate you joining us and look forward to having you on more in the future. And until our next episode, I'm Bill Zimmerman.
I'm Daniel Shirley. He's Jeremy Timmerman. Go Tigers.